Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our joint webinar with WisdomTree. And today we are looking ahead at the forces shaping the global markets. Our topic is megatrends and investment themes for 2026, which is a very interesting topic. And I think it's at the moment it's so even more critical for investors than ever before. And to help us navigate these themes, I'm happy to introduce our keynote speaker, Mobeen Tahir. Mobeen is the Director of Macroeconomics and Thematic Research at WisdomTree, and the WisdomTree is a global leader in thematic investing and exchange-traded products. So, good evening, Mobeen.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me and for having us from WisdomTree, and looking forward to the discussion today.
Yeah, me too. But first, I will quickly go through the current market situation in Finnish, and after that, the stage is Mobeen's. So, yes, eli nyt pitäisi varmaan näkyä tämä markkinaympäristö. Ajattelin ottaa ihan lyhyen tämmöisen muutaman minuutin markkinatsekkauksen tähän, koska nyt on taas tässä viimeisen viikon aikana taas aika paljon tapahtunut, ja tämä meidän markkinaympäristön nopeusmittarikin on liikahtanut. Oli pitkään tuolla suosiosakkeita tilassa, mutta nyt kun tuo volatiliteetti nousi aika voimakkaasti, niin laski tuohon neutraaliin tilaan, mutta ei kuitenkaan mennyt tuonne välttäosakkeita tilaan. Ja VIX, joka mittaa siis implisiittistä volatiliteettia, kävi jopa yli 30, mutta on sitten pikkusen rauhoittunut, ja eilisen päivän päätöskurssit oli Jenkeissä, hän olikin sitten jo plussalla, ja tänäänkin on ollut sitten Helsingissä tukeva nousupäivä. Ja se, mikä käänsi markkinat, oli jälleen yllätys Trumpi ja kommentit tästä Iranin sodan mahdollisesti nopeasti päättymisestä, ja öljyhinta sitten tuli alas aika paljon, se rauhoitti markkinoita ja tuki osakekursseja. Mutta yleisesti ottaen tuo Jenkkien talousdata on vähän ristiriitaista, ja tietenkin arvostustasot on korkealla, niin silloin tätä volatiliteettia varmaan vielä tässä tulevina viikkoina tullaan näkemään, että ISM eli teollisuuden ostopäällikköindeksi odotuksia mittaava yllätti positiivisesti, mutta sitten taas työllisyysluvut oli jälleen aika heikkoja, ja tällä viikolla keskiviikkona saadaan sitten inflaatioluvut. Ja tässä on sitten muutamia, WisdomTreellä löytyy todella hyviä tämmöisiä laajempia markkinakatsauksia, ja sitten niin kuin temaattisesta sijoittamisesta myös hyviä settejä, niin kannattaa käydä tsekkaamassa, ja tähän otin muutaman kuvan tuolta WisdomTreeltä. Ja tämä oli ihan mielenkiintoinen, että kun nyt Jenkeissähän on nämä välivaalit, niin tyypillisesti välivaalivuodet historiassa, jos katsotaan tuolta 50-luvulta lähtien, on ollut historiallisesti niin heikompia kuin mitä keskimäärin. Ja näin tuossa, jos katsoo alempaa viivaa, mihin tuo nuoli osoittaa, niin näihin tuossa kevät aikoihin sitten tulee tämmöinen pieni droppi, ja sitten loppuvuosi on niin kuin aika nousuvoittainen, mutta historia ei tietenkään ole tae tulevasta. Se, mikä taas sitten tukee osakkeita, ja minkä takia nämä kaikki ylimääräiset shokit, mitä tuolta markkinoille tulee, niin sitten ei kuitenkaan aiheuttanut sen suurempia laskuja, niin on se, että nämä tulosennusteet edelleen niin kuin on todella positiiviset, ja EPSit on, eli EPS-ennusteet, pörssiyhtiöiden tulosennusteet on huipputasolla ja sojottaa ylöspäin, niin yleensä silloin osakkeet on myös kehittynyt positiivisesti. Et sitten jos tulosennusteet lähtee vähän niin kuin alaspäin, niin sitten se pörssikurssien kehityskin sakkaa, niin kuin tuosta näkyy, kun tuossa on kaksi kuvaajaa päällekkäin. Se, mikä on myös positiivista historiassa ollut osakkeille, on dollarin heikentyminen. Ja jos taas mennään sitten toiseen suuntaan, niin se taas on ollut sitten negatiivista osakkeille. Eli tässä on kuitenkin monta tämmöistä niin kuin isompaa teemaa taustalla, mitkä osakkeita sitten tukee. Ja se, mikä riski nyt nosti tässä loppuviikosta ja maanantaina päätään, niin oli tämä stagflaation riski. Eli jos öljyn hinta nousee voimakkaasti, raaka-aineet nousee, niin saadaan niin kuin inflaatio kiihtyy, mikä taas tarkoittaa sitten sitä, että mahdollisesti talouskasvu hidastuu, ja silloin puhutaan stagflaatiosta. Ja tämä on niin kuin osakkeille todella negatiivinen skenaario, mutta jos se ei toteudu, ja alatte katsomaan, että mitä sinne salkkuun voisi sitten laitella ja tilanne normalisoituu tuolla Lähi-idässä, niin small capit on suhteessa näihin isoihin yhtiöihin niin todella houkuttelevasti hinnoiteltuja. Ja tässä tämmöinen lyhyt intro. Ja mennään sitten now, let's go to your presentation, Mobeen. I will start it here, and then the stage is yours. So, and I can be your secretary, so you just say when to change the slide, so I will do it for you.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much for the intro and for the handover. Megatrends and investment themes for 2026. We are spoiled for choice in 2026 when it comes to thematic ideas. So we wanted to bring some key ones into the discussion today. If we go over to the next slide, we start the story going back to 1440. In 1440, mid-15th century, Johannes Gutenberg invents the printing press. Now, that was one innovation that changed the world. It created many new industries, and the world before 1440 and the world after 1440 were two very different worlds. Now, when we experience transformative technologies like artificial intelligence, for example, today, it feels like those technologies are unprecedented. The change created is unprecedented. Maybe it is. Maybe we've just not lived through those transformations of the past, so we just don't know what it felt like when the printing press was invented. There is, however, one thing that is definitely new that wasn't the case back in the mid-15th century, and that is the ability to access the investment opportunities created by these sorts of innovations. And that is what is so important for us as investors, because each new innovation that pops up creates very exciting opportunities to capture that innovation and that investment opportunity. So with that in mind, if we go to the next slide, we see that we are indeed spoiled for choice. And at WisdomTree, what we do on a monthly basis, we map out the European thematic universe in terms of what themes are out there, which themes are getting investment flows, which themes are performing well, which themes are not performing well. So we show both sides of the picture. And what we are showing on this slide is an illustration of flows and performance in the month of January 2026. We will very soon have the February version of this report as well. And in January, top ETF flows, so in terms of exchange traded funds, we see energy transition materials was a key theme in terms of investor flows, rise of tension. This is the defense topic, semiconductors, nuclear, robotics, and automation up there in the top 5. In terms of performance, so here when we talk about performance, we include not only ETFs, we also include mutual funds. And we see that nuclear was number 1 in terms of performance, continuing its strong performance from 2025. Energy transition materials, similar picture. Space, interestingly, very interesting theme and could be an interesting theme. We've been hearing about the IPO of SpaceX potentially this year. So interesting to see investor interest in this space. And of course, semiconductors and rise of tension, once again, that geopolitics. So what we gather from investor flows and market moves is that 3 topics are worth paying attention to. Number 1, energy addition. Number 2, geopolitics. And number 3, technology. And rightly so, we've moved to the energy addition section, because now what we'll do is we'll take each of those sections in turn and look at the top ideas from our side at WisdomTree worth paying attention to in those categories. So starting with energy addition, the world will build vast nuclear energy capacity in 2026 and beyond. So we've identified 3 topics worth paying attention to in this category. Let's start with the first topic on to the next slide. Our first topic is the raw materials, because it all starts with the raw materials with which we build clean energy capacity. And here what we are doing is we're talking about raw materials, specifically focusing on rare earths. Now, the same arguments that I'm going to make for rare earths can be extended to lithium, they can be extended to copper, they can be extended to many other raw materials, particularly industrial metals. But rare earths, let's take a look closely, because rare earths have been capturing a lot of attention in markets in the last few months, because demand is expected to go up. And here we are showing projections from the International Energy Agency. Demand is expected to go up from key sources like wind energy. What rare earths do is they make the electric motor in a wind turbine more efficient, so you can generate more electricity for the same amount of wind, which is just what you want to do. In electric vehicles, they give the car longer range on the same charge. And then there are these other uses. So rare earths are used in consumer electronics. They are used in your laptops, in your mobile phones. They're also used in defense applications, artificial intelligence. All these industries that the world is investing heavily in, rare earths get used for their unique properties that cannot be substituted by something else. So rare earth demand is going to be an important driver, and certainly our experience at WisdomTree tells us that investors are focused on this theme. Rare earths is one example, but you can apply the same arguments to many other strategic metals. That brings us to this next slide, which is the next idea within the energy addition category, nuclear energy. Nuclear really took off last year in 2025 when there was a catalyst. And the catalyst was in May of 2025. President Trump announced a series of executive orders. And the executive orders stated that the US will quadruple its nuclear capacity by 2050. Now, US, as you can see on the chart on the left-hand side, is already the biggest country in the world when it comes to total capacity in nuclear. Now, the US saying that they will quadruple capacity in just 25 years really gave that jolt to markets. And if you look at the performance of the nuclear theme, really took off after that announcement from President Trump. That didn't just come out of the blue, quadrupling of nuclear capacity in 25 years. In fact, the year before, in 2024, 31 countries had already agreed to triple global nuclear capacity by 2050. The US just went a little bit further in 2025. And those 31 countries included the US, they included France, so notable players in the nuclear space. Now, the reason why I'm contrasting current operating capacity with new capacity under construction on the right-hand side is, yes, there's a lot of new construction happening, but does the new construction in the pipeline get us to that goal of tripling nuclear capacity in 25 years? Nowhere near. What that means is new projects will have to be started, new technologies will have to be introduced, and in the world of nuclear, there's an exciting new technology just around the corner. It's called small modular reactors. So we traditionally know nuclear reactors to be these large, big power plants. In the future, they will also be supported by smaller power plants, which can be employed or deployed rather locally where there's a hot demand source for energy. So a lot of things happening in the nuclear space, and we see a lot of demand. Supply is, again, pretty tight because uranium, the fuel that powers nuclear energy, we'll have to invest more in mining more uranium in the future. So the entire value chain, whether it's the miners, whether it's the companies supporting the industry, or indeed the producers, they are all going to benefit from this. So nuclear energy, another very exciting theme to watch in 2026. That brings us to our idea number 3, renewable energy. Now, in a world where energy needs are just going up all the time, all hands are on deck. We're saying, well, all options are on the table. We need to make sure we tap into all the different types of energy, the sources of energy, and deploy them where appropriate. So renewable energy, of course, the world has been deploying renewable energy quite heavily over the last couple of decades at the least. But if you look at projections from the International Energy Agency, they foresee that by the end of this decade, which is just 4 years away, global renewable energy capacity will double. Now, just imagine all the capacity we've built over the last few decades. We're going to double in just the next 4 years. That is huge. Of course, that is going to move markets, because that would mean companies getting involved and their products and services being deployed. Solar and wind, of course, are the more prominent forms of renewable energy, which will account for the majority of that additional deployment. We see that solar power is expected to drive 80% of that increase in the years to come. But there are other alternatives as well. For example, hydrogen last year really took off because hydrogen power found a new use case in data centers. And data centers need reliable 24/7 energy. You might not want to rely on wind or solar power for data centers. So you turn to nuclear, you turn to hydrogen as a reliable source of power. So hydrogen may be coming back as well, and that's something to pay attention to. So renewable energy is not just wind and solar, it's lots of things, and it is certainly back in favor. Now that generally interest rates have come down compared to a few years ago, this theme is starting to take off. So that was the energy edition topic. We next turn our attention to geopolitics. And of course, when we wrote this outlook at the start of the year, we didn't necessarily talk about the events of last few weeks. We couldn't have foreseen them, what's happened in the Middle East. That had risk in terms of geopolitical risks. The level of risk is high. And so we recognize that geopolitics is a key pillar in the outlook for the year ahead. So within geopolitics, again, we identified 3 themes. And the first theme, familiar theme. Now, rare earths were mentioned in the energy addition section. It's so important that we mention it again in the geopolitics section, because there's a geopolitical dimension to rare earths as well. What's the geopolitical dimension? Well, supply is tight and very concentrated. The world needs rare earths to power AI data centers, to make defense applications, to make mobile phones and laptops. But supply is very concentrated in a handful of countries. And refining, so mining, you see already, is very concentrated. China dominates. Around 80% of total mining supply comes from China. But when you look at refining, more than 90% comes from China. And the world has been continuing with that dynamic for a very long time. But of course, now that gives China an edge in negotiation when it comes to tariff negotiations. And the US wants to reduce its dependence on that one individual source of supply. And so they've been looking to invest in the domestic industry. They've been looking to partner with other countries like Australia, looking to build new supply chains. But that will take time. You can't just build something overnight, which China has been building for decades. And so China's share in the refining industry is expected to remain high in the years to come. And that creates an additional risk. The risk is that already supply is tight and may fall short of demand, but it is very tight on top, which means that what could happen is, if any of the links in the supply chain break at any point in time, the chronic tightness in supply could become acute tightness, which is to say that You could have supply shocks and prices could rise. So that is a dynamic to keep in mind, because not all commodities can be sourced from all over the world. There are these supply chains to be aware of that can cause prices to rise structurally, but also cyclically. And rare earths is one such example. On the next slide, we turn our attention to the second theme, Europe defense. Now, Europe defense has been a hot topic. In 2025, we believe at WisdomTree it's going to remain a hot topic for 2026. Why? At WisdomTree, what we've been doing is we've been speaking to defense industry leaders for the last few months, given we have strategies in this space. So we wanted to bring the best insights from the leaders in this space. So we've spoken to Rheinmetall, we've spoken to Fincantieri, the Italian shipbuilder. We've spoken to Renk, which is a German company. We've spoken to Indra's, a Spanish company. And something we hear from all of these companies is that the pace at which they are receiving new orders is just unprecedented. Rheinmetall are currently facing an order backlog of around 64 billion euros. 64 billion euros of order backlog. Fincantieri, the shipbuilder, is facing an order backlog of 60 billion euros. And the CEO who came on our podcast, The Next Big Thing, they told us that the order backlog gives them enough visibility for the next 10 years. So they've got enough orders to keep themselves busy for the next 10 years. That's how many, that's the pace at which new orders have come in for naval supplies for this one company. And the reason why these orders are coming in is because European governments have raised their defense budgets and they are looking to procure more from within Europe. And that means more orders going towards European defense companies. So yes, we think about specific conflicts, but this theme is not about the conflict in Ukraine. It's not about the conflict in the Middle East. It's about Europe deciding that they want to be strong enough so that in the future they aren't exposed to geopolitical risks and vulnerabilities, which means that this strengthening cycle will take time, because you put in an order for a battleship or a submarine or a fighter jet. You don't just get delivery in a week or a month. These are long-term contracts, and they provide long-term revenue for the companies providing these things as well. So this is a structural theme in our view. Yes, the markets will continue to react to the geopolitics on the ground, but the ground reality is that these companies are getting long-term visibility for their order books, and that means long-term visibility for their revenues and earnings. And that brings us to the next topic in the defense space, that the defense theme extends beyond Europe. Last year, European defense sector really led and continues to carry that momentum into 2026. But we've seen that Asia is seeing a lot of interest in the defense topic as well. Asia has its own geopolitics, but Asian defense players not only are catering to the local market, they are also catering to the global market. And one such example is South Korea's Hanwha, catering to a demand from Poland. As an example, we saw at the start of this year, a $4 billion deal between Poland and Hanwha. And we are also seeing aspirations of South Korea in general to become the world's fourth largest defense industry by 2030. So there's a lot of growth happening in some of these markets. Japan, for example, has already approved a record budget for defense of around 58 billion US dollar equivalent. And that really tells us that focus of strengthening defenses to prevent geopolitical vulnerabilities and risks that extends to many countries around the world. And so defense is going to be a theme to keep an eye on in the year ahead. And that brings us to our third pillar, So we spoke about energy addition, we spoke about geopolitics. Let's talk about technology. Of course, so much is happening in the world of technology. We talk about three main topics. Let's start with the first one, and that is physical AI. Now, there's a lot of talk about, is AI in a bubble? Is AI going to decimate software stocks? And there has been some volatility, certainly, in parts of the tech ecosystem in recent weeks. But we keep our eyes on the ground realities. And the ground realities are that the technology is advancing. And the winners of this technology, not always apparent, but some interesting ideas certainly present themselves. One is physical AI. And physical AI is this new trend that AI is moving from the digital world to the physical world. Today, if you and I, we go on to, let's say, ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, or whatever AI application you may be using, we interact with it through the web. So it's a digital interaction. It's online. The AI is happening somewhere across the world in a data center. That computation is happening. Physical AI is the idea that the AI happens on the device, whether it is a drone, whether it is a humanoid robot, or it is an industrial robot. The machine itself is smart enough to do the AI computation. Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, he made the statement start of this year that the ChatGPT moment for physical AI is here. And of course, to make that statement that the ChatGPT moment for anything is here is bold. But when Jensen Huang makes that statement, you take it seriously, because he's not just making a prediction. He's actually making it happen. NVIDIA-powered chip and NVIDIA computers are powering the machines which will run the humanoid robots, which will run the drones and all of these applications that are becoming increasingly smart. So when I say smart, that they will have AI on the device. It's a very interesting theme to pay attention to. Number two, in the technology world, quantum computing. Last year, investors started to pay attention to this theme because the ChatGPT moment for physical AI may be here. The ChatGPT moment for quantum computing is not quite here, but maybe around the corner. And investors have become more aware that it's not always waiting for the ChatGPT moment that matters. It's about seeing, well, what's the next ChatGPT moment and in which industry is that going to happen? And quantum computing is one such industry where we might just see a ChatGPT moment. Quantum computers will not replace traditional computers. They will sit alongside and they will be used for very specific applications like drug discovery, for example. Wherever you have to simulate nature and make predictions, quantum computers will be very handy. So designing better materials for things like batteries, identifying better drug candidates. These are the sorts of applications where quantum computers will become game changers. And if you ask IBM, they are very optimistic about making a fully functional quantum computer as early as 2029. So they're saying that some applications and in some specific use cases, quantum computers will outperform classical computers in 2026. In 2027, they might scale those things up, and then 2029, you might be going commercial. So the timelines are right around the corner. So if you think maybe 2029 is that ChatGPT moment for quantum computers. But markets don't just wait for that moment. Markets have already been moving, and investors are indeed paying attention. And that brings us to our third topic, which is data centers. Now, there is an enormous amount of investment. When we talk about AI investments, when we talk about the CapEx, the capital expenditure, all the money that the big tech companies are pouring into artificial intelligence, is going into data centers. And most recently, if you may have heard NVIDIA's latest quarterly earnings, that's what they said. They surprised markets once again with their revenues and their earnings, because they said, look, the demand for data center chips is just so high from these big tech companies, the hyperscalers, the Microsofts and the Metas and the Googles of this world, that they just have to keep giving them more and more chips. So data center is an industry that you can access in lots of different ways. And the reason why I show you this chart, the global data center market could see a lot of growth in the years to come. You can access it through the chip side. Of course, you need the chips, you need the computers to power the data centers. You need the actual energy to power the computers. So the nuclear story is somewhat linked to data centers as well. The hydrogen story is somewhat linked. So energy certainly intertwined with this. And then finally, the real estate side of things. So the companies actually developing and managing the real estate, the infrastructure. So lots of different ways to access this story, which again is an interesting theme to watch. So that brings us to the end of the themes. And if we turn to the next slide, we just summarize the topics that we've covered: energy addition, geopolitics, and technology. And within each, we've touched three key topics. The ones that we've highlighted, we are particularly excited about, and we have high conviction. But having said that, all topics on this list are very promising, very exciting, and worth paying attention to. Before I close, a few illustrations on the next slide. We just show ways to access some of these ideas. WisdomTree, an exchange-traded fund provider, and we have been in the thematic space since 2018, and we've built a big brand in this space, offering solutions across lots of different themes. We started with artificial intelligence. That was our first thematic ETF back in 2018. And since then, we've built a full suite of products, including rare earths and strategic metals, Europe defense, uranium and nuclear energy, quantum computing, renewable energy, most recently physical AI, humanoids. And you may notice that in some cases, we also partner with industry experts, where it makes sense to bring in external expertise so that each product is built in a smart way. And one example we want to share with you on the next slide is the multi-thematic WisdomTree Megatrends UCITS ETF. So you can, of course, invest in single themes, but you can also invest in multiple themes at the same time. And the multi-thematic ETF is an exposure across 18 different themes. And we do that every year. We look at what are the right themes to include. So that is what we call the strategic asset allocation. And we have 18 themes in that allocation right now. And then on a quarterly basis, on the next slide, you'll see, we see that what themes are doing well. So there's a momentum element. Okay, if a theme is doing well, we tap into it, and the weight gets tilted towards that theme, and the themes that are a bit down at any point in time, their weight comes down. So it's a smart way for gaining access to a wide number of themes without having to pick the themes yourself. So lots of options for investors to consider, but all in all, it's an exciting time to be an investor in the world of thematics, because so much is happening, so much to choose from, so many themes doing well. And at WisdomTree, it is our pleasure to be able to offer smart solutions that you can consider for your portfolios. But with that, I will close my session, and very happy to take any questions or discuss anything else.
Yeah, thank you, Mobeen. It was very interesting, and the important information also for your presentation. But nyt siis voi laittaa kysymyksiä tänne chatin puolelle. Mulla on tässä muutama kysymys valmiina, ja me sitten käännetään tämä englanniksi, että saa ihan suomeksi laittaa kysymyksiä tänne, ja kysytään sitten Mobeenilta. But can you, Mobeen, see the chat?
I can see.
Yeah, the first question is, from Upe that Nokia stock has grown very strongly, probably because of AI increasing demand of Nokia solution. But is this stock growth based on fundamentals? Is Nokia going to be winners of future networks? Do you follow the Nokia stock or individual stocks or only the teams and ETFs?
I like given the market we are in. Of course, Nokia has come up in the questions. We don't have views on individual stocks, but what I can say is it's interesting to see Nokia redefining itself and its role in technology. In fact, when we spoke to Rheinmetall as well on the podcast, which I mentioned earlier, they spoke about a partnership with Nokia for their capabilities in precisely the network side of things. So, of course, traditionally we used to use Nokia mobile phones, but even if we aren't using that, the Nokia is rebuilding itself and redefining itself in the network side of things, and yeah, that could create some very interesting customers, like Rheinmetall being one. So while I don't have an exact view on whether the fundamentals make sense or not, it's certainly interesting to see what Nokia is doing with its business model.
Yeah, and the Nokia's guidance for the 2026 is not that great, so they expect maybe like 10% EBIT growth for 2026. But I think the most of the stock market performance of Nokia is because of the re-rating of the stock, because of the NVIDIA investment and the defense side of the business. And so it's a re-rating of the stock. It was really cheap, let's say, 1 year ago. Now it's making new highs, not the all-time highs, because they were very expensive back in the day, but in last 5 years. So so Pirjo asks that you showed WisdomTree ETF for European defense. Do you have ETFs for more global defense market? And you can answer for this, and at the same time I will show you how you can find WisdomTree ETFs from our ETF tool. But maybe here are the ETFs that you presented, but do you have other ETFs for defense?
I'd say watch this space. We are looking at other exposures right now. We currently have the Europe defense ETF exposure, but if you keep an eye on our website, you will hear more from us on the defense topic very soon.
Yeah, and now I can show you the ETF tool. Eli tässä on siis ETF-työkalu, joka löytyy täältä Sijoittaja 360. Tähän kun kirjoittaa ihan vaan WisdomTree'n, ja tässä nyt on valittu omaisuusluokaksi osake, niin täältä löytyy todella paljon WisdomTree'n ETF, jota pääsee sitten tutkimaan. Ja täältä löytyy Europe Defense, ja löytyy sitten muitakin defense-puolen ETF. Aika laaja kattaus, löytyy kyllä monenlaista temaattista ETF. Ja täällä on tämä strategiset rare earth minerals ETF myös. Yes. So the next question was, what do you think about the Honduras Strait being closed? The Iran this strait being closed at the moment. What do you have any opinion on that?
Yeah, of course, very topical given how much of an energy market shock that has created. Now, the Strait of Hormuz is one which where roughly a third of global oil supply flows through, and it's not just oil; many other things flow through it as well. For example, fertilizers, and that impacts the agriculture sector. So oil is the first thing that has been impacted, and of course, ultimately, oil has a knock-on impact on the prices of everything else, and that's why a lot depends on how long this thing is going to last, right? And we just don't know. Very recently, we heard President Trump say that the war could be coming to an end very soon. And indeed, oil prices have pulled back since then. So they peaked earlier in the week, well above $100 per barrel. But since then, there's been a pullback because maybe markets are expecting this to end a bit earlier. And so it's a very, very, it's a situation that is exactly aligned with the reality on the ground. So if there is peace, if the conflict settles, you would see that the price of oil would pull back very quickly, because our view at WisdomTree is that fundamentally oil is well supplied. There was no reason outside of the conflict for oil prices to rally this much. Oil has risen because of the conflict, because the Strait of Hormuz is blocked. And once that situation eases, whenever that is, you would go hopefully back to pre-conflict situation, and maybe other risk assets pick up as well.
Yeah. And then another question is that how is the electricity market, maybe about the utilities in Nordic countries or in Europe due to increase in data centers? What do you think about that?
Sorry, could you repeat
how
the
is
question?
it expected to develop?
The data center market?
Yeah, I mean the electricity market and maybe the utilities.
Absolutely. So such a close relationship between data centers and the energy sector. We've seen in the US as an example. So that's a blueprint, because the US is most aggressively developing data centers. And in the US, we've seen the companies providing the energy. For example, Constellation, one of the S&P 500 stocks, Constellation Energy has been striking deals with Microsoft and Meta to provide nuclear energy from its nuclear plants for as long as 20 years. So Microsoft and Meta have struck 20-year deals with Constellation. Traditionally, it's a utility company, so it's an electricity provider, but it also runs nuclear plants, and for that reason, it's been getting a lot of attention. So the same story applies elsewhere. No matter what's the market, whether it's the Nordic countries, whether it's anywhere else in Europe, whether it's Asia, wherever there will be aggressive development of data centers, we'll have to think about, well, how are we powering those data centers? And inevitably, the providers of energy will grow in tandem. So if you see money going into data centers, you can expect that immediately more money will go towards the energy providers as well in those markets.
Yeah, and you said that you are going to provide these ETF flows for February soon.
Yes.
So, but do you have any view about how the investor sentiment has it changed now for the key teams, or do we need to wait those February numbers?
So investor flows, when I referred to the report, of course, that was for all of Europe. We'll have an exact snapshot. We haven't published that report yet. But I can tell you anecdotally that investor flows remain in line with those. In the world of thematics, they remain in line with the themes that I mentioned. So defense remains very hot. Defense remains a hot topic. Investors are continuing to look at that theme. Materials and rare earths being one example, strategic metals and rare earths, that's a very hot topic as well. The third thing where investors have been going in, one that we didn't necessarily discuss in great detail, is related to the SaaS apocalypse, which is the apocalypse in software stocks, because that theme has pulled back quite sharply, because there's this idea that AI is going to just completely replace all software stocks. We believe that narrative is perhaps overdone, particularly in certain parts of the market, like cybersecurity stocks have oversold. And there is still going to be a place for cybersecurity solutions in a world of AI. And we think investor flows are reflecting that, because people are going back into themes like cybersecurity, recognizing that maybe they've been penalized too much and they're now rather cheap relative to their relative importance.
Yeah, I think so too, that there's a lot of subsectors inside the software team that are really interesting. And now during the last month, investors, they have just shoot the stocks and ask the questions later. Has been the theme for that all the software stocks has been declining, but still, for example, the cybersecurity, it's also under the defense team. It's really important for that also. I think you already answered for this, but do you about the 10-year backlogs? That was a quite. I don't know. Have I ever heard backlogs that are that long? But so you guys in WisdomTree, you see that the megatrend for defense industry is a structural trend, not the short term, like a 1 year or 2 year phenomenon.
Correct. And you can never predict short-term market moves. Of course, markets react to news and the situation on the ground with regards to geopolitics. But what we are saying is that when it comes to thematics, when it comes to megatrends, you have to look at where the underlying story is. And there is certainly a structural trend here, which is where I gave that example of those backlogs. So there is certainly a long-term story in place, and short-term moves that you know very hard to predict, but the story remains intact.
Yeah, and Marco is asking that, do you think the pure uranium ETF offers a better investment opportunity than the nuclear ETF that focus on reactor builders and nuclear industry companies? So do you have any view on that?
So we like uranium. We like uranium because uranium is already undersupplied, and it is expected to be even further undersupplied in the years to come. So uranium stocks, uranium miners have done really well in the last 12 to 18 months. But if you invest exclusively in uranium miners, you miss out on some very interesting things like the midstream sector and some exciting innovations. In the midstream, for example, you can't have nuclear power without uranium enrichment. So you need enrichment somewhere between 3 to 5% to generate electricity. You need the gas turbines. You need the equipment that goes into making the nuclear reactors. All of those things will benefit from this build out that is happening. And we're talking tripling of global capacity. So we don't just need the fuel, we need the equipment as well. So those things will benefit. Then small modular reactors, which is this new type of small nuclear power plant, which can be built in factories and then deployed, say, close to a data center. This innovation is getting a lot of attention from markets, and stocks in this space are doing very well. So if you invest exclusively in uranium miners, you miss out on some very interesting things, which is why at WisdomTree we believe in investing across the value chain.
Yeah. And what about the Max 7 stocks? Do you have any view on that? Do you think that they are going to be good investments in the future?
You know, we did this research about how leadership in stocks, of course, is hard to maintain. Now, of course, Mag 7 stocks have grown so much for so many years that gains year on year are, of course, it just becomes a mathematical challenge at some point. But that is not to say that can't happen. NVIDIA, for example, is defying all odds and continues to beat earnings estimates quarter after quarter. So Mag 7, if they find a way to get a return, particularly that's the big question. If they find a way to get a return on all the investments that they are making, particularly on AI, if they can monetize all of their AI applications to the point that they give them a sufficient return, they of course they're in a very strong position because they're building the foundations of AI. So they could be in a very strong position, but of course they have to answer that question as well. But in the meanwhile, we at WisdomTree favor looking at a broader set of stocks beyond the Mag 7. We don't think it's just going to be Mag 7 leadership indefinitely. There are other players in the broader market which are offering very exciting opportunities, not just in the US. You can look beyond the US, like Europe has bounced back so well in the last few months. So I think investors are looking beyond the Mag 7, looking beyond the US even, to see that maybe they've been underappreciating the potential of Europe for so long, and now with more fiscal stimulus, with monetary policy support, with good earning outlook for many companies, European stocks are doing well as well.
Yeah, and our theme for the 2026 has been diversification. So I think it's still a good theme for 2026. And I think this your WisdomTree megatrend ETF is a very, very good example of that also. So it gives a good diversification for the most important megatrends, and also have this momentum dynamic. So it's a good product to investigate more. But I think we have now been talking more than 50 minutes, and it was a really interesting webinar. And thank you, Mobeen, a lot of all the presentation and all the answers that you gave to our difficult questions. So thank you for your time.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for having us, and thank you to everyone for joining and listening.
Joo, kiitoksia kaikille ja ei muuta kuin ensi kertaan. So, bye bye everybody and have a nice evening.
Thank you.